Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy, with I'll call it an introductory deck review because I haven't used this deck, I just got it, and a walkthrough. I will do a walkthrough before I'm finished here. So this is the box, and it opens thusly. It has a magnetic flap here, so it does close firmly. And you open it up here, and you have a book. The book is fairly thin. I will look at the book here in a minute. And then you have the cards in a well in the box. So this is a box that can sit on your shelf and house the cards, if that's, and it's got one of these little things so you can pull your cards out to help you get the cards out. Now, of course, I was attracted to this deck because of, look at that spectacular backing, easily reversible, and the spectacular artwork on here. I've already been shuffling these cards a little bit just to get a feel for them. So that, that's my initial attraction to it, was that. But also, I was looking for a deck, for decks, in fact, I wanted more than one, that had a more masculine feel to them as opposed to decks which I had found myself being attracted to, being a woman. I was attracted to a lot of the more feminine decks, or decks in which women were more often, much more often featured on the face of the cards. And so I thought that needed some modification or correction. Now, in this particular tarot deck, Tarot Illuminati, it pretty much follows Rider-Waite-Smith, very traditional in that regard. So you have the equal number of men and women that you would normally see in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But the art itself is so out there and in your face, and it just, to me, it has a very masculine feel to it. As a very traditional deck, it has a very masculine feel to it. And we'll look at the cards a little bit more here. I'll do a walkthrough of the cards, in fact, so you'll have a chance to look at all of them. And then the guidebook has full color, full page, full color, well, this is the major arcana, pictures of the images. Okay, so I mean, look at that devil. Look at the musculature. All right, very masculine there, and it reminds me of, and then there's smaller images of the cards on the minor arcana. So you have those men who are extremely muscular and active. The male principle in this deck is just very I don't know if you say out there, very, very, they all look like they've been to the gym, let's just say that. And then you have the women who have a little bit of the, to me, she's not trying to be sexy, but that pose is very weird. Let's just say that. I'm not criticizing it necessarily, but it strikes me as coming from the tradition of fantasy, and I can't remember his last name, but his first name was Boris. And there was another fantasy illustrator in the, and I can't remember, it was the 60s and 70s or 70s and 80s. At any rate, a lot of the women look like they came from that kind of a background. So to me, not offensive at all, but leaning a little bit in that, not in the offensive, but in the sexual fantasy tradition, kind of. We'll have to, when we go through the cards, you'll see. But of course, since it's, and they do, I will say this, they do have quite a bit in the way of androgynous images. And here we have alchemy, and to me that looks like an androgynous image, or the face of the man has a very feminine aspect, which I think is great for the temperance card, because it is about mixing the opposites or different things to come up with something new. So that makes total sense to me. The traditional boy on the sun card looks particularly androgynous, but otherwise the queens in this deck strike me as very, their outfits primarily make them, you know, the shoulder pads from the 70s and 80s. It was thought that as women were going into the workforce that they needed those shoulder pads, that there was some kind of psychological advantage to having your shoulders broadened, that sort of thing. There's a feel of that to me with this deck, with some of the queens. What they're wearing, it kind of supports their power, you might say. Okay, so let me get my dog out of here. She's chewing on a bone. The guidebook is, I'll just move the bone so she can't chew on it. Is tall, it has beautiful images, but it's not very thick. And the descriptions, there's this minor, the descriptions are one page. It says the Fool, the infinite possibility of chaos, then themes and concepts. So it's in here, you just get a little bit with the Wheel of Fortune. And that's pretty much all the way through. And I read, I think in the introduction of this book or something, that the illustrator is Eric C. Dunn, and the writer is Kim Huggins. And it was that Kim Huggins was hired near the release date or the deadline for having this complete. And so it was created rather quickly. I don't know if they only wanted these kind of cursory descriptions or not. Certainly you can get by with these. So I suppose somebody could get these and get this deck and immediately become a reader. Oh, that's interesting. So you got up there. No, can you get up there? No. No. But I would recommend that if you get this deck that you already have some familiarity with the tarot. The biggest problem with this deck, I love the size of it, is actually a little bit smaller than I think the Rider-Waite-Smith, and so very shuffleable. Very shuffleable. Oh, it is the same size. It's exactly the same size as a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. And I don't have any problem with the weight of the cardstock. I like the fact that it's matte. It's great. However, because I think, or at least in part because it's got gold gilding on the side, it was very difficult to pull it apart. And you see instantly out of the box, and this was bought new, as you're pulling these cards apart, you get, I can't get it to focus, there, right here. I even had one actually tear on me. It actually tore. And you can see all the way up to the middle here. So as you're pulling them apart, you're creating damage. They're damaged, so they're coming that way. And the paint is coming off here too, or the print, the ink. Also, I don't know if it will show up here. Let me see if I can get it to show up here. Focus for me. focus. Maybe if I put my finger up here. It's not going to. There's a ridge right here. There is a ridge on this part. You can hear it maybe scraping all along this side of the card. It's not here, but here there's a ridge. And what that's from is how they cut the cards. And to me, that's incredibly annoying. So I may have to go through all of these cards and sand them. You get very fine sandpaper and you sand off that very annoying, I mean, you can catch your fingernail on it even. Well, that helped. Maybe I'll just have to go through with my fingernail and zip it down. And even here. Anyway, so that's especially such beautiful images, to have to do that and to have that situation again where it gets caught, it rips, you know, straight out of the box. You can't pull them apart without damaging the cards. That was a huge disappointment. That, you know, if you're going to put, and this is not a cheap deck. This is not a cheap deck, which is why I didn't get it initially. I asked for it for Christmas. Because of the, it's not super expensive. I think it's about $25 or something, but that's to me is on the upper end for a tarot deck. And so I expect to have quality cards in there. I don't expect to have cards that won't come apart, that damage each other when they do come apart, that have ridges on every single card. I mean, I can run my hand along that ridge right there and not even feel the actual card itself, the face of the card. That's how high up the ridge is on that. So there you go. That's a downside, and I would make that a pretty serious criticism for the makers of this deck to have, you know, this beautiful artwork, beautiful box, heavy-duty box, full-color guidebook, you know, color images, and then they crap out on the cards. I mean, please, believe it or not, it is about the cards, at least for me. Okay, so let's look at all of these images, and I've been shuffling these, playing with them, so some of them might even be reversed. Maybe not. I probably went through and put them all back upright, but they won't be in order. Okay. But I do want to give you a walkthrough. Now, those two were major arcana cards. The minor arcana, the wands card, is a Persian. They're all Persian culture. And that's one of the things I really like about this is the different cultures. Persian cultures being, you know, desert. Traditionally, Seven of Wands, do you have a desert in the background? At least I take that to be Persian as opposed to Egyptian. They don't look Egyptian to me, but so that's again that Persian, or I can't think, Assyrian, something like that background. The pentacles are obviously Asian. More wands here. The cups, and this is odd to me, the cups end up being a fantasy kind of culture, and to me that's a weird thing to say, that emotions or sustenance are coming from a fantasy. That it's like saying that love is a fantasy. And so that's an aspect that's weird to me. And all the people have white hair. which is interesting, and it strikes me as kind of the land of Elric or something. But in terms of the masculine nature, look at his legs. You know, they've all come from the gym. They spend a lot of their time in the gym. And then look at her. I mean, to me, I don't care that she's exposed practically down to the navel there. She strikes me in that fantastic throne, those shoulder pads there with their spikiness. To me, that's a very masculine representation of the Queen of Pentacles. And some of these, like, I don't see the Eight of Cups as a card of sorrow, and yet he looks like he's sad there. I don't think of the Eight of Cups as being cast out or anything. I traditionally think of it as being a choice that you make to go out looking for something that is lacking in your life. And so this gives it a different take. But most of them are very traditional. And you don't have pages, you have princess, which is a common form of adjustment made to decks. Okay, so the swords are Elizabethan England, represented by Elizabethan England, so they're the Caucasian, you might say. The Caucasian. Well, and then the fantasy, so the cups end up being Caucasian as well. So, semi-multicultural. Not entirely by any means, but it is nice actually to see different types of people represented. And look at that. She not only has shoulder blades on her shoulder, shoulder pads on her shoulder, she has shoulder pads in her hair. Let me see, does he have any bulging muscles? No. Just bulging, well, I can't say. Not bulging pants in the masculine way, just bulging pants, period. I think that's a lovely Ten of Pentacles. Oops, 2 cards there. Love the Fool. I think I'm particularly liking the renditions of the Pentacles in the Asian culture. So I don't know. I think that it does say at some point in this rather thin guidebook, big but thin, that there's an e-guidebook that is much more involved. So, you know, one thing I would like to understand is why in this fantasy world we have everybody with white hair. What's that about? And even though there's some wonderful, you know, with all those defined muscles in those men, some wonderful anatomy, this is really weird, this anatomy here. I'm not sure why we need an extended arm there. My sister's a massage therapist, and she was with me at the time that I received the deck and was going through, and I said, "Sister, is this possible?" She said, "No, that is not a human arm." But anyway, it doesn't bother me that much, but it is weird when everything else seems to be very anatomically correct. and bulgy. Yep, hard to get much more masculine with that Nine of Wands, which is a masculine card in general. Yes, I've got it. Okay. Kind of like the aspect here where it looks like the sea is starting to encroach on her, which I think is great because I think that that brings out the aspect of urgency or a time limitation for making a decision. And this has some fascinating, there's, I don't know if you can really see it, but there are bones that go, it's kind of, the death figure is actually sitting, it looks like, on hip bones as part of his saddle. And the spine comes up along the mane of the horse, very eerie, but I think also very appropriate. Whoops, there is somebody here. Marvelous Queen of Swords, yes, yes, Queen Elizabeth. Kind of funny feet on the Emperor, very big armor on his feet. Queens are not people to mess with in this deck. Well, I could see that. You know, I was just thinking, looking at, well, that's a very romantic image. It's not quite the traditional Two of Cups, but if you think of the cups as being romantic or about romance, then, you know, then you are kind of living in a fantasy. I don't think of them as strictly romance in my own way of interpreting them. But if you do, that would explain why he's putting them kind of in the realm of fantasy there. Only one card. So as you can see, for the most part, a very traditional deck, just with heightened, beautiful imagery, the introduction of the different cultures. Obviously, with this fantasy in the cups, it's a European-oriented fantasy. May even be a little bit more on the Germanic side, but not absolutely speaking. And there's that figure there that strikes me as androgynous. The hair looks like very much a little girl, but traditionally it's a little boy. And even the sun looks like a woman. And so that's a little odd, the sun usually being construed as masculine. I think this is a gender reversal. I can't even recall if the Nine of Swords is usually a man or a woman, but at any rate, again, just strikes me as a very masculine. We're having a masculine, the art in it is very broad and in your face and filled up, and just, I think it's the in your face quality about it. There's no uncertainty here. You're in there. Why do I feel like I did I do the I don't recall seeing the High Priestess who's on the cover. So I don't know if some of them stuck, but I tried to give you a good walkthrough so you could kind of see all of the different cards and decide whether or not you connect with this artwork in its totality. I sometimes, I myself have been tripped up by only seeing a few cards in a deck and making assumptions and finding out those assumptions were not correct. So I hope that this complete walkthrough has been helpful to you in deciding whether or not this deck is for you. I will be using this deck, especially because it is very close to being a traditional tarot deck. So I will be using this deck, and probably within 3 to 6 months, if it doesn't work for me particularly, if there's something that absolutely doesn't work for me, then I will usually come back on and do a review. Sadly, I have to say, when something works really well for me, I often don't get back on and do a review. Although I might, they might come up in a favorites deck kind of a video. But there you go. There's the Tarot Illuminati. The Illuminati has absolutely nothing to do with the association, society, whatever you want to call it, that is full of conspiracy theories and scandal and all of that kind of nonsense. It's nothing. It's just, Illuminati just means light, possessing light. Tarot that possesses light. So, which of course all tarot decks do. And oracle decks and stuff like that. But in any case, as I was saying, I may review it again to give people additional feedback on how it works while being used. Alrighty, take care. Bye-bye.